Hi there, it's Richard Little, your land partner. Just trying to get hold of the tech, screening video in 2 or 3 different places. It's all about learning new tricks. Can't teach an old dog new tricks, I think the saying is, or my dad used to say. And it's very difficult anyway, but certainly when you're teaching it yourself or somebody else is trying to teach me. Anyway, right, yeah, Richard Little with you from your land partner and property developers academy. I'm going to be talking about, it's the last in a video series on funding. Going to be specifically talking about funding and cash flow. And it's something that people often get caught out on. So that's what we're going to be sharing with you today, or I'm going to be sharing with you today. So I think thus far in funding, covered all the various aspects in terms of, where the money's coming from, the funding stack, effectively, the senior debt, the mezz debt, the equity, etc. And that's all great, and that's fine. But I want to talk to you about cash flow, and not the business or the business or the project, more specifically, generally the project. And there are things that you will likely need to raise more cash for, so more equity. And I want to talk through some of those things really, just to sort of make sure that people are aware that there are what we would call non-qualifying expenditure. So things that you might believe you are going to get funded by the senior lender, but actually in reality, they're not so keen. And when you're in initial discussions with the headline numbers in terms of I don't know, I've got £2 million purchase and spend, and they're going to lend you perhaps 50% of the purchase. Say that was 500,000, they're going to lend you 250,000, and in theory they're going to lend you the 1.5 million to build. And with your high level numbers, that may well be the case. But there are certain things that even experienced developers shouldn't really get caught out on, but they do. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes discussing this with you today. So when we put out a contract, so you either, when you're going to deliver a project, you're either going to be the main contractor yourself, or you're going to be engaging a main contractor, or potentially a managing contractor. But either way, we're obviously going to have some numbers sitting there, and we've got proposed. We might have some quotations, we might have some estimates. The quotations might include things like provisional sums, etc. So some unknown numbers, but we are going to roughly come to a contract sum or a project cost. Now, what generally happens is that most of those costs are what we would call qualifying costs. So, in a typical project, all the materials and the labor, the bricklayers, the carpenters, the plumbers, etc. All of those costs should be qualifying costs to actually draw down from your main development finance. Yeah. Now, there are some that are in a grey area. And I want to go through some of those. So first of all, there are bonds. Now, there are all sorts of bonds in our industry. The main bonds really are performance bonds or payment bonds, which both of those relate to. A performance bond is a contractor that will provide you as the developer or as the client, they will provide you with a bond to say that if we don't perform, there is some backup to sort of say that, if we go bust or anything like that, there will be some backup money for you to actually come in and make a claim. And the reverse to that is a payment bond. So if you are hiring a contractor, they may require a payment bond. So you actually have to purchase the bond. Well, there's 2 ways of doing it. I'll explain that in a minute. Yeah, generally you will purchase a bond, and that's actually saying to the contractor, actually we will pay you, and if there is any problem, there is something coming here. So effectively, a bond is like an insurance. It's something that sits there. Now, performance bond and payment bonds. Now, sometimes they're qualifying costs, and sometimes they're not. So it's actually being clear with your lender, your senior lender, actually what they accept and what they don't. So we've often seen cases of if you are a developer and you have gone out to a contractor, and you are saying then when you go out for tendering process or pricing, whatever you want to call it, is you want to be clear at the outset whether you expect them to provide a performance bond. So i.e. what I said before, are they going to, if they have any issues in terms of performance in delivering your project, for whatever reason, there is some sort of insurance, if you like, behind that to sort of help out should things go wrong. Now, generally, if you insist on them providing a performance bond, they will turn around and say, we want a payment bond from you. Until you've got some sort of real established credibility, or you've worked together before or whatever, it's pretty normal. Bonds, we like to sort of negotiate, they cancel each other out, and bonds are quite expensive. So, you know, if you've got to buy a bond, and just to give you an idea, I am going into a little bit more detail on bonds probably than I intended to, but hey, it's all good information. So let's look at the performance bond and the payment bond. It'll save another video later on, possibly. So let's look at the performance bond. So we're actually asking the contractor to provide a bond. Now that will relate probably, or no, it will relate directly to the size of the project and the time it's likely to take. So if it's £1 million contract and it's going to take a year, then they're effectively they're going to be delivering, you know, about £800,000 of the work each month on a sort of, you know, sort of straight line sort of spend, as it were. Now your performance bond is going to see, it's a case of, well, what happens if they go bust at month 1? What if we have problems at month 6 or month 7? So the bond is going to relate directly to the sum of the contract and also the time period. The payment bond is going to really generally reflect on, it normally sits around about 2 months spend. So if they were requiring that, and they're saying, well, actually we're doing £800,000 of 800,000, what we're talking about, £80,000 of the work a month. Yeah, it's obviously late in the day. £80,000 of the work a month, then that bond will probably want to cover a couple of months. So you'd be looking for a bond that's going to be worth about £160,000. Well, the cost of those bonds could quite easily be anywhere, depends where you get them from, 10%, even up to high teens percentages. So the cost of that could quite easily be £20,000. Where's that £20,000 coming from? If it's not a qualifying cost from your senior lender, you've got to find it from equity. You will have to find cash. So this is where sometimes these extra bits, you know, that they add up. There are other types of bonds which ones that people really get caught out on, and these are bonds that are relate to road works, sewerage works, and junctions. So the bond to roads, which is road work that's done under Section 38, sewers is done on Section 104, and junctions, so junctions with roads and roundabouts and things like that is done under what we call Section 278. So they're all legal documents. We'll have talked about Section 106 before. It's just another one of those. All right, it's a legal document, and actually that's agreed with the local authority and yourselves, and you enter into that legal document. Now, associated with those, because these are effectively performance bonds, the council are coming to you, or the authority, the highway authority in many cases, are coming to you and saying, okay, what if you do not perform? What if you're the road that you're putting in, for instance, in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it all breaks up, right? So they want either a sum of money. So the other way around is having a bond is a sum of money. So you can lodge that sum of money. I'll come back to that in a minute. Or you buy a bond. So again, we've currently got one on site at the moment, and I think the cost of the road, or the calculated cost of the road by the local highway authority, and it's their numbers you go on, not yours, is, I think it's 120,000, something like that. And the bond that they're looking for 120,000 is costing something, I'm going to say 14 to 16,000 pounds, something like that. We've also got a section 38 on there as well. Or that is the section 38. We've also got section 104 relating to the sewers, so connection to the sewers. So there's a bond on that, and I think we're about to have a section 278 on the junction. There's only a smallish development, 10 units, and we've got. I think we might get away with that CO1, but I think we will have at least 2 bonds. They all cost money. So there we've quite easily got £20,000 worth at least in bonds. That's a payment. You don't get the money back. That is, you're buying an insurance. Okay, so that money has to be found. You know, if it hasn't been calculated in at the beginning, you'll be amazed how many people don't even know until they start going down the process. So if it hasn't been calculated in, you may well be able to negotiate with your senior lender where you could possibly use contingency, but that's not normally the case, and I will talk about contingency in terms of cash flow and that in a minute. So the alternative to purchasing bonds is even worse for your cash. Is you have to find the sum of money. So like the example I've just given in terms of the section 38 for the road was, say, 120,000. We purchased in a bond for 14 or 16 grand, something like that. The sum of money we would have to lodge in an escrow account or something similar for an agreed period, which could be 2 years or 3 years, would be £120,000. And that's obviously not great for your cash. That's why bonds are actually much more, much more widely used. And bonds, you'll get them for brokers, insurance brokers, etc. It's just another form of insurance. Yeah. So that's mentioned in bonds, which could have a serious impact on the amount of cash that you need to raise. So other things really, and I've touched on this once or twice before, but you may well have in your professional fees, in your appraisal, in your proposal, your financial proposal, is you may well have some development management fees, project management fees, etc. And if they are qualifying and the lender considers that they are necessary for the project to go ahead, then that will be a qualifying spend and they'll agree to it. But if it is actually you as the developer want to get a couple of grand, £4,000, £5,000, £6,000 a month because it's going to help you live, then unless you are a qualified project manager, etc., you're not likely to get that allowed. So you might need a bit more cash to perhaps, supplement your income if that's what you need to do. So again, it's all about whether they're qualifying or not. So I've seen quite a few people, certainly newer developers, that come out, somebody's told them somewhere that actually, you can charge yourself a fee, 1%, 2%, 3% or whatever, and you earn out of it. And it can be done, but generally, if you haven't got any experience, you're not going to qualify to get that. And I've seen a few people get involved in projects and actually thought they were going to earn some money out of it and actually found that they couldn't. So other things that affect you in terms of affect the cash flow are contingency money. So all funders and obviously all developers will have a line somewhere on their spreadsheets, on their appraisals that are saying contingency. Depending on the nature of the project and size of the project, that contingency could be, we sit sometimes at 3% on new build. It could be up to 15 or even 20% if you're looking on, so perhaps some unknown listed building type work and all that sort of stuff. I've seen actually even higher. Now that contingency, it isn't a case that you can draw down that contingency just because you've spent a bit more on something. You will normally have to you'll have to convince somebody that's generally it's the cost surveyor, the surveyor that's coming down on behalf of the lender before that money is released. The monitoring surveyor, often referred to as, is you've got to convince them that it is a contingent sum. It is actually thing. So it was an unseen. Well, okay, if it's unseen, why was it unseen? Or have you just simply overspent? So don't just think if you've perhaps got £100,000 in a contingency pot that you are going to just be able to draw that down regardless. They will want to see, because there is always a worry when the contingency gets spent, if you like, really early in the project. that contingency is there, really is there for real unforeseens, for whatever, you know, recently going through, you know, a coronavirus and stuff like that. There's been some increased costs in certain things. Well, actually, it's quite reasonable to take the contingency out. But if you start running your contingency down, if we were to say, if we had a project and it had £100,000 contingency on it, and we were halfway through and we'd spent 80,000, the funders may ask you to top up the contingency. So they may well have allowed you, this is really sort of one that people get caught out on, is they may well have allowed you to take those costs and take that money from the contingency, so draw down the funds so you can pay all the bills, etc. But actually you might reach a point where they start getting nervous and say, well, actually contingency's gone down, you know, it's 20% of what it what it was, and actually you're 50% way through the build. So they may well ask you to top it up. So they might say, actually, we want it back up to 50%, for instance. You've got to find another 30,000. Where are you going to find that £30,000 from? Okay, so all I'm pointing out here is it's not just lining up your cash that you need at the beginning. It's to be aware that you might need additional cash as you go through. Now, one of the ways that you can use your cash flow, depending on quite where it sits, is many of you will have heard of retention monies. So within most contracts, there is an element of retention. So effectively, you are allowed to hold back a certain amount of the invoiced sum. So let's say the contractor has done £10,000 worth of work for you. They've actually applied for £10,000 payment. You've gone to your lender and say, I want £10,000 to actually pay for this bill. Now, it will be that if you've got in your contract that you may well be holding back anywhere from 2 to 5%. Let's just make it simple for my maths and say 5%. You're holding back. So the actual bill you will pay will be £9,500. Now, some lenders will not forward the retention monies. They will actually hold that back. Other lenders are quite happy for you to draw that £10,000, and that means that you pay your contractor your £9,500, and you've then got £500 which should sit in your pot, in your retention pot. So obviously on a bigger project, so if you 10 times that every month, you could be getting £5,000 in retention monies. You know, we've got projects on the go that's probably, I think the projected spend next month is 300,000. In fact, I know it's 300,000. We had a meeting today. It's £300,000, and I think the retention on there is probably maybe 2.5%, something like that. So that is a lot more. What is it? It's 7.5 grand, something like that, isn't it? You know, so that's 7,500. So there are little bits that you might start building up a bit of a cash pot, but don't be too tempted to dip into it. You can, you know, but you've got to be mindful that retention monies will be due at a certain point, you know, subject to the contract. It could be due before the contract is finished. It depends on how it's set up. It could be due 12 months after the payment's made. So, and if it's a longer project, then you could be paying retention monies before the end. So contingencies you've got to be aware of. Retentions can work in your favor, but not necessarily. The other thing that you also have to think about, depending on the terms of your senior debt, is actually if you are drawing down, say, £100,000 payment for a project, are you going to get the £100,000, or are they drawing down every time they draw you down? Are they taking a fee? Are they taking 1%, 2%, or whatever? It's not uncommon. So actually, on the £100,000 drawdown, if they are taking, say, we're involved in a project where I think it's 2%. So the 2% of everything drawn. So the £300,000 next month, if that goes in, and if the monitoring surveyor says that that's okay, then that will be £300,000 less the 2%. So, and that's a non-qualifying cost. So, so generally you've got to find that fee. So it's really understanding when your fees are due. So this is why we turn our appraisals into a cash flow. Part of it, you'll have a cash flow forecast, and you want to start looking at actually when am I likely to need some money. and this is, you'll generally, most of you, if you haven't got any experience, you'll probably have a QS, cost consultant, or somebody that's working with you on this, and they'll be drawing up your cash flows and you know, all your projections, and everything works in and around, you know, a cash flow in some sort of way. We work slightly different in so much as we have a development financial sort of a spreadsheet that's actually, it is a cost to date and projected stuff, but it's a bit more than the cash flow. We're looking at all sorts of other things as well, just to try and get it under one spreadsheet. So I think there's quite a lot of things that you do need to be mindful of with the cash flow. So when you are starting a project, even though your money all seems lined up, it's always useful, if you haven't got any cash yourself, and many developers have already put all their cash into the project or other projects, so they may well have to go out, and it might be 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, but you may have to go out and get that. Now, it might just be a temporary thing. You might need to actually, all of a sudden I need £20,000. I mean, you shouldn't really ever get to that point. But if you have disagreement with your senior lender, so if you are putting in, and this happens quite a bit, it impacts cash flow massively. So if you are having or you have a disagreement with their cost consultant, say, that's coming on, so their monitoring surveyor, sorry, that's come on site, you've put in for a drawdown of £100,000, somebody has on your behalf £100,000, they come out and they actually say, actually, no, we don't say that £100,000 work has been done. We accept that there's £90,000 that's been done. So you're entering, we'll call it a dispute. It's got other terms, but we'll call it a dispute for now. You're entering a period. Oh, okay. But what you need to do is agree the 90 grand to get the 90 grand down. But what you've then got is, you've got a dilemma with your contractor or your subcontractors, if you're the contractor yourself, is they still want their money. Now, what I see often is, well, actually, we're not paying you it because the monitoring surveyor said that work's not been done. So you can enter a situation where you've got upset contractors or subcontractors on your end. So what we'd always say is, you have to take a judgment on it, but sometimes we would say, we'll pay the contractor. Any disagreement we've got with the monitoring surveyor, rather than enter into a real big discussion and argument, etc., is okay, depending on what it is, should normally catch itself up the next month. So we would need that £10,000 in this case, to find that £10,000 to pay the main contractor, so that they're all happy, or the subcontractors, if that's relevant. So they're all happy, because you want to keep them happy and you want to keep them going on site. Now, you're not going to pay it if there is a genuine reason. You're only going to pay it if it's a little bit of a grey area, and we get lots of those grey areas. And sometimes it might be materials on site, for instance. Well, actually, the monitoring surveyor doesn't accept, because those materials are on site, but actually, as soon as it's gone up the road, or as soon as they've gone up the road, that could be on the back of a truck and gone to another project. And it happens. So just because you might be, we actually had a large order of insulation come to site pre the lockdown, and we were already ordering, and we decided that things might get a bit tight, so we ordered a lot. So we had a large amount of insulation on site and bought for that reason. So it was then a discussion between our main contractor and ourselves and the monitoring surveyor, acting on behalf of the lender, to sort of say, look, can we actually draw some money down, because that money is going to be due, etc. And that the lender on that particular project are very approachable, and we come to an agreement on it, and they said yes, that's okay. So there's two ways that they can do that. They can either give you it as a part of the scheduled payments, what they're actually going to do, or actually they could release some contingency fund to pay for it. So they're not really over lending or anything in that case. So that, again, if you're in good communications with your lenders, it's really important. So the other side of that is, you need to be in good communication if you've got investors on a project and they are perhaps on some sort of, profit share or whatever. And I see this quite a bit complicated, but I see it quite a bit. Then you need to stay in touch with your investors. And if you are looking for £10,000, for the example I just gave, in terms of a disagreement between yourselves, the contractor, and the cost consultant, the eternal triangle, I think it's sometimes known as, or other words, then you need to borrow 10 grand. And if you've got investors on the site already invested in that project, if they have other funds, they may be prepared to do that. But you need to be talking to them all the way through, telling them what's happened and why you need this. And, we would always suggest that you prime investors up. If you know that they perhaps are investing £100,000 with you, but they have other funds, then we'd always be talking to them, whether there are available funds for short term. So in that example, it's 10 grand and it's probably for a month, 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks at most. But it's amazing. I mean, we do a little bit of that from people we know. We do quite a bit of the, 20, 30, 40,000 pounds, really short-term loans, month, 2 months, maybe 3 months at the most. And it's for people that run into all of the problems that we're saying today. And that's why we're talking about, and perhaps in more, because we've been on the other end of actually helping people out in order to, to get over these problems, because they are issues, whether it's all the way through the bonds or, disagreements in terms of the payments or the drawdowns, and fees and stuff like that. They're issues that keep people awake at night, because it's worrying about the money. But actually, with a little bit of experience in and around your project from the cost side of things, then we should be expecting some of these. Hopefully they don't happen, but it's always about preparing for them. So what we'd always say in terms of a project is prepare to plan to actually be able to bring more money in at shortish notice than you originally hope you need to do. So, and we're always sort of say that, particularly in terms of drawdowns and things, we've heard all sorts of disasters where there's an issue between the borrower and the lender, and the contractor hasn't been paid for a couple of months, and they end up walking off the job, break the contract, etc., and it's generally down to paperwork. The lender's not very good. Often the monitoring surveyor causes problems, often. So it's the wrong monitoring surveyor. They didn't get the report out quick enough. The lender's not quick enough to put money through. I mean, we had a valuation done, and I'm going to say it was last Thursday, and the money was in the bank. We had a project meeting this morning, and the money was in the bank yesterday. No, this morning. Sorry, this morning. The report went in yesterday, and the money was in the bank. That's what you want. Yeah, but it doesn't always happen. So if that money, you're relying on that money to come in to pay your contractors, and it's not coming in for whatever it is, the contractors, it's your problem. It's not really their problem. And as soon as you start passing it on to their problem, I'll tell you what happens. Pretty much, you will get a lot more variation costs on that job than probably you needed to, because they will start saying, well, actually, it's all right, you as the developer, we have a contract with you, but actually you're just blaming the funder. Well, actually, that's not anything to do with a contractor. So contractor relations management, if you like, it goes out the window. Its major problem is about money. If they've got money due and you've got payment terms agreed, you find the money. If you can't get the drawdown from the funder, then if there's a valid reason, you talk to your contractor. You don't wait for them to come back to you and say, "Oh, where's my money? Where's my money?" And I hear this so many times, that's just not the way to do things. So the bottom line of this is, the message here is, if you need 100,000 or 20,000 or 300,000 pounds, depending on the scale of the project, to pay your contractor for a month's work, if they're invoicing you on a monthly basis, you need to be able to get that money. So again, it's access to equity, access to cash. So never really, if you think you need £200,000 equity for a project, you should be trying to find that the 250 or £300,000, that you don't necessarily have to borrow it, but you want that facility to borrow it. And there's too many people that get caught out by thinking that the cash flow is you know, it's not important. The money, that's what it's going to cost. That's what I'm going to get. There's loads of profit. It's all about the cash flow. When that income, when the refinance of the sales go through, you know, and all of that sort of thing. And that's where people's profits just get eroded because they don't realize in terms of time frames and things like that. Anyway, probably going off topic as per normal, but most of you will be aware that that's what I do. So I'm not going to make any apologies. So I think we've just given you a bit of an insight of the importance of cash flow, but in this particular respect of making sure you've got access to funds to cover those cash flow shortages. That's absolutely crucial. To say, you know, good projects, you know, have trouble because the developer or whoever's acting for the developer isn't proactive enough and thinking far enough in front. Is okay, what if we are a bit short with we have that disagreement with the monitoring surveyor, etc., and we need 10 grand, you know, we've got a £5 million project here, you know, and actually we can't find 10 grand. Okay, so we need to be sort of thinking about that. So anyway, I'm going to shut up now. So I'm going to sign off. So it's been Richard Little from Your Land Partner, and that's been part 72 out of the 100 days. And I believe, I'm fairly certain, that is the last video in respect of the funding section. And we're going to be moving on to that exciting bit, the build. So we'll see you in the next video. Take care.